Hey, good morning, good morning. Hey, if we haven't had a chance to meet yet, I'm Kyle. I am one of the pastors here, and honored that you take some time to be with us. If you've just, maybe like joined us in the last couple weeks, you're like, I've never seen this guy before. I am one of the pastors here. I have been traveling with my bride. We got some time together. We hadn't had some extended time alone since 2020, so that was amazing. Yeah, amen, right? Thank you. Thank you, sister. You see me. So it was a great time. But if you're just jumping in with us, man, we're so honored to have you. We are right in the middle of a group of talks on this book called Exodus. It's the second book in the Bible. It's in the Old Testament. And so if you've got a Bible and you just like go to page like somewhere between 60 and 100, but depending on how big the letters are, you're going to find Exodus. And you're probably familiar with some of the stories in Exodus. You may be familiar with this guy Moses. Wasn't just Moses Malone, an NBA player. There was a Moses before that. And some of you may have even seen the Ten Commandments or the Prince of Egypt. There's something that gives you some kind of exposure to this incredible story. We're going to be looking at it together over the next several weeks and really just really starting to think about it beyond maybe what you heard growing up as a Bible story as a kid, right? Sometimes it's our over-familiarity with these stories that's the danger, and we miss somehow sometimes how powerful some of these things are and how much they speak into our lives right now. And so, opening very long quote, so settle in, okay? All right. But it's 1809. Men are following with bated breath at the March of Napoleon and waiting with feverish impatience for the news of wars. And all the while, back home, in their homes, babies are being born. But who could think about babies? Everybody was thinking about battles. In 1 year between Trafalgar, see, I can't say this, and Waterloo, there stole into the world a host of heroes. Gladstone was born. You guys remember Gladstone? No, you probably don't, right? He was a prime minister in the UK. It was very instrumental to speak out against the slave trade in the UK at this time and helped to abolish that completely. Lord Tennyson, of course, we know him as Lord Tennyson, famous author, poet, was born at Somersby Rectory. Oliver Wendell Holmes in Massachusetts. Abraham Lincoln was born that year. You guys know him, right? In Kentucky. And the music was enriched by the advent of Felix Mendelssohn in Hamburg. And of course, Mendelssohn is one of the people who helped to discover Bach. So nobody thought of babies. Everybody was thinking of battles, yet which of the battles of 1809, anybody know of any of those, mattered more than the babies of 1809? We fancy God can manage the world only with great battalions, but with all the time he's doing it with beautiful babies. When a wrong wants righting, or a truth wants preaching, or a continent wants discovering, God sends a baby into the world to do it. I don't think much has changed since then. The world still doesn't focus on babies or values the children God sends into the world. As the Lord said, my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, saith the Lord. For the heavens are higher than the earth, and so my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts your thoughts. This is by the famous Baptist preacher F.M. Barham. Everybody knows who that is? No. None of us. Another baby that was born. Isn't it interesting that God tends to send babies into the world to solve problems? It's a lot slower than we imagine things to be. And today we're going to meet a baby that enters into a problem situation. And just in case you haven't read the narrative of Exodus before, let me just catch you up. Basically, what has happened at this point is that God's people, they end up in Egypt because this guy Joseph told his brothers that they were going to bow down to him, and they didn't think much of that, so they threw him in a well. And then some people came by while he was in the well, and they're like, you know what? We could at least make some money off of this guy. So they sold him into slavery. He ended up in Egypt. He ended up actually being wrongfully imprisoned. That was a fun story. You'll have to read that one on your own. And then he ends up, because of his wrongful imprisonment, he ends up interpreting dreams for people that often forget him, and he stays in prison longer than he should. But then eventually he gets before the Pharaoh and interprets a dream for him and becomes kind of the Pharaoh's right-hand guy and makes it so that Egypt enriches themselves. But then it says a Pharaoh came that forgot who Joseph was, didn't know him. Joseph was dead. And he started getting real nervous about this group of people that came from Joseph's lineage, these Israelites. Wasn't sure about them. And On top of that, it seemed like they just kept propagating. There's just like more and more of them. It's like cockroaches. You kill one, there's 5. How did that happen? And so they decide we got to enslave these people and make their lives very hard. That will make it so that they can't give birth as much. And guess how that worked? It didn't. It didn't work. So then they're like, all right, we got to have the midwives kill the baby boys. And that didn't work. So the Pharaoh decided what we're going to do is we're going to throw all the baby boys that are born into the Nile River. And this is where our story picks up. Just made this announcement. I don't want you to just imagine that you're pregnant when you hear this proclamation go out, okay? Now, I know not all of you can ever be pregnant. That's why you have an imagination, okay, everybody? All right, and some of you have been, so your imagination is better than others, all right? But here we go. You're pregnant. You just hear about this thing, and you're very pregnant. You're about to give birth. Any day now. What's going through your mind? Talk about unexpected timing. I think the first thing that goes through your mind is please let it be a girl. You with me? Something. Baby comes out. Definitely not a girl. Now what? And this is the predicament that God's people find themselves in. So the story picks up. It picks up in an interesting way. It says, there's a man from the tribe of Levi. He married a Levite woman. No names, just people from a tribe of Levi. She became pregnant. She gave birth to a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, in fact, in the ancient language, it says that she saw that he was good or beautiful. It was a beautiful baby boy. But what mother does not look at her child and think, this child is beautiful? Are you with me? She hid him for 3 months. Anybody ever try to hide a baby before? That had to be difficult. And on top of that, she's a slave, so how does that work? Did they get maternity leave or something? Is she just carrying the baby? We don't know any of this, okay? The Bible is annoying when it comes to details sometimes. It invites us instead to imagine these things and to think about them and to ponder these things. Imagine trying to hide a baby for 3 months and then finally to decide, I can't hide this baby anymore. When she couldn't hide him any longer, she got a papyrus basket for him. She coated it with tar and pitch. In fact, in the original language, it says she made an ark. That's what it says. Maybe you're familiar with the old story of Noah when he made the ark. It saved him from the waters. Maybe she was hoping that this little ark was going to save her baby boy. And she placed the child in it. She put it among the reeds at the bank of the Nile. And her sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. That's a pretty awkward moment as a 7-year-old or 8-year-old. Just going to watch and see what happens to my baby brother in the Nile. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Animal Planet, but the Nile is not a very nice place. There's a lot of stuff in there. It's in Africa. It flows north, which is very weird. And we always imagine that everything flows south. But that's just not how it works. The Nile flows north. So here he is. The sister's watching him at a distance, and then something happens. The Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe. Why did she do that? We don't know. She was dirty. Even Egyptians need to bathe. And her attendants were walking with her along the riverbank, and she saw this basket among the reeds. And she sent her female slave over to get it. Isn't this interesting? There is a big problem that's happening in Israel. The people are enslaved. All the baby boys, it's genocide. We're going to deal with these people once and for all. And then God sends a baby boy into this situation. Very precarious, very uncomfortable. And that baby boy is actually going to be the answer to all the prayers of the people at that time. Much later. So I think there's an important truth in this, which is that sometimes the latent answers to the hardest problems in our world are actually in the next generation. Listen, our world is fascinated with battles. We got all kinds of news about battles right now, right? What's going to happen there? Is Are we going to have like a near peer war with China? Are they just watching all the ammunitions? Like, what's happening? You guys know because you listen to long form podcasts that you send to me. Just come on, be honest about this, okay? I know that you know about these things, all right? Some of you have gotten way more into Epstein than you need to, right? That more information than is even possible to digest and make sense of. And yet here we are, and I just want to say that some of the answers to the hardest problems that we are currently facing are actually in our kids, not in us. This is the beauty of what it means to be a community of people that raise up the next generation, make disciples of kids in the everyday stuff of their lives. Listen, we do not know who right now is downstairs receiving teaching about the scriptures. No idea. No clue. We do not know the kind of problems that they will face even. We can't even begin to define them. But what we can do is help them to build upon the foundation of the scriptures, which is what we're doing each and every week. This is not just babysitting during Sunday. And that's important. It matters. We pour into the next generation because the answers aren't going to come from us sometimes. The older we get, the more aware we are of those things. We start to realize how little time we have to solve some of the most difficult problems. So I just want to encourage you, just begin that now. Let's just build this into the culture because God often uses the next generation. So the story continues. Back to Exodus, we're back. The Pharaoh's daughter is there. Now, the Pharaoh's daughter, she knows about her dad's edict, I think, okay? These are educated women in the Pharaoh's household, all right? She knew what was going on, but she opened the basket and she saw a baby. She saw a human, not a problem. And she felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew babies, she said. And then Moses' sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, hey, shall I go and get a Hebrew woman to nurse the baby for you? And she's like, yes, go. Great idea. So the girl went and got the baby's mother, and the Pharaoh's daughter said, take this baby and nurse him, and I will pay you. Did you guys forget that the Israelites were slaves at this point? The Hebrews are slaves. And all of a sudden, Moses' mom, on a wing and a prayer, makes this basket ark to try to protect her baby from the Nile, which we all know is not the best plan, but it's the best plan she had. And now she's got the Pharaoh's daughter asking her to nurse her own baby, and she'll pay her. This is a really good story. This is nice. It's a nice turn of events. So the woman took the baby and nursed him. Big shocker. And when the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, and she named him Moses. Whoa. I promise this is not for dramatic effect, okay? But it is really cool that right as I said Moses, the lights just went out. That was awesome. Hey, can we do that again, like at the next? All right, let's see. No? Okay, listen. Even in the dark, Moses is cool, okay? So, she named him Moses, and it's very interesting because in ancient Egyptian, the ses just means like son of, right? It's like when you see the Norwegian team play and everybody's name is blah, 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 son, you know, because it means son of Ingerson, right? Yeah, that's what ses means. So Moses is son of Mo. Like Ramses, you may have heard some other Egyptian names before. They all tend to end in ses, most of them, except for King Tutankhamun, but I won't get into that right now. But the point is that in ancient Egyptian, it just means nothing. But what the writer here is saying is that Moses actually sounds like the Hebrew word for draw out of the water, saying, I drew him out of the water, which is very interesting because very soon this baby is going to help to draw people out through the water. Where his basket was hidden among the reeds, he's now going to walk a people across the sea of reeds. There's a lot of interesting things happening here, but here's what I want you to see, because this is going to be important. The Pharaoh's daughter sees another human there. She sees a human. She doesn't see a problem. She recognizes that he's Hebrew, but it's in that moment that she realizes there is another image of God here. All right, this is getting exciting. We're getting back. We're getting back here. Oh, okay. There's another image of God here. Every person that has ever lived on this earth, it doesn't matter what race, what nationality, what ethnic group you come from, every person needs to be seen and soothed and safe and secure. Every person. I want you to see that Pharaoh's daughter reacts to Moses here. She sees him. She feels something for him. You know, she has options. She could just like push the basket back into the river and make this someone else's problem. You know what I mean? But she doesn't. She moves on behalf of this child. She wants to provide security for him, safety. This is going to be important as we continue the story here. So this is what happened. Pharaoh's daughter picks up the baby, and then if you've ever seen The Prince of Egypt, basically between verse 10 and verse 11 is like 45 minutes of the movie, okay? And that's all we get in the scripture, all right? We just get one day, he's grown up, all right? That's all we get. Moses, who was a Hebrew boy, went to live in the palace in Pharaoh's house and presumably grew up there. And actually, according to Stephen, there's a interesting moment in the scriptures in the book of Acts. There's this guy, Stephen, and he's getting stoned. And at that time, he begins to quote back these stories that we're talking about, specifically about Moses. He actually begins to bring some interpretation and to challenge the people on the way that they're reading these things. But according to Stephen, it's been 40 years since verse 10. Okay? Moses was in Egypt for 40 years, according to Stephen. So 40 years have passed, one day after Moses had grown up. Understatement here, okay? According to Stephen, Moses had also received an Egyptian education, and they were preparing him in some way to be some kind of Secretary of State or something like that, right? Moses had all the rhetorical skills and political skills that any of Pharaoh's household would have had in their disposal. I mean, he had received the best education that was possible through the Egyptians. But one day, after he'd grown up, he went out where his own people were, and he watched them at their hard labor. Now, how does Moses know that it's his own people? I do not know, okay? I have no idea. Anybody that tells you otherwise is just telling stories. It's not in there. We don't know. Moses just somehow knew that these were his people. Some people think that maybe he had some kind of different racial background, but that seems kind of unlikely given that he was able to be raised in the Pharaoh's house. And then also that later in the story, the Midianites say that he's an Egyptian. So who knows? We have no idea. The point is that he recognized that these were his own people. And he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew. Now, the context here is that the Egyptian was beating the Hebrew to death. This is where it becomes less kid story-ish. It says, Moses, looking this way and that and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Now, but I don't know about you guys, but at my first reading, sounds very sneaky of Moses. Are you with me? It's like he looked like this. He's like, all right, there's nobody around. Kill this guy and get away with it. That's actually not the context here. This is a made phrase that means he looked this way to see if anyone was going to do anything. And he looked that way to see if anyone was going to do anything. And then he felt no one is going to do anything. I'm going to do something. You ever have those moments where you're kind of looking around like, is anyone going to step in to this situation? And then you realize like, oh, I'm the person. I have to step in. And so Moses does, in the only way that he knows how, and he puts an end to this guy getting beaten to death. But there's consequences. In the next passage we see, the next day he went out and he saw two Hebrews fighting. And he asked the one in the wrong, why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew? It seems like this was happening again, except one Hebrew was trying to beat another one to death. And he tries to step in, like break up the fight, like, hey guys, what's going on? And then the man says, "Who made you ruler and judge over us?" Now, I don't, you guys, some of you haven't read the rest of Exodus, but let me just tell you, this is hilarious. It's hilarious because guess what? Guess what Moses is in about 5 chapters? Ruler and judge over all the Israelites, okay? It's very funny. I mean, it's just irony. Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian? And then Moses was afraid and he thought, what I did has become known. It's interesting. There's no indication that Moses necessarily felt bad about what he did or felt like it was wrong, but realized that it had become known. And in the next passage, we see that the Pharaoh heard about this, and he tried to kill Moses, and Moses fled from the Pharaoh. And he went to live in Midian, and he sat down by a well. You ever have those moments where you think you kind of have some picture maybe of what it is that God's calling you to do with your life, and then as soon as you try to step into that in some way, it feels like everything, it's like you have the opposite of the Midas touch, like everything you touch turns to dust. You with me? I have had these moments. Listen, I felt God calling me, I was sure of it, calling me into full-time ministry. So I sold my house, I moved to a foreign country to become a missionary, and 3 months into the missionary field, the church that we were planting split. Let me tell you, you ever received like letters from somebody that's trying to raise money? Very hard to send those letters. Hey everyone, just to let you know, the missionary organization that you're supporting doesn't exist anymore, but we're going to try to start over with the few disappointed people we have left. Please send money. It's not a very up and to the right kind of situation. I think that's part of what's going on here with Moses. I think Moses, he seems to have some kind of inkling of the power and the position that he's been given within Egypt, and he realizes that he can somehow affect some change, and he starts to try to do it, and everything just falls apart. And so he does what a lot of people do when everything falls apart. He goes to a well, which in the Bible is like the club or the bar. Listen, I don't know if you guys have been reading Genesis, but everybody in Genesis meets their bride at a well. Okay? Listen, if you're a single Jewish lady, you're like, I got to find a well. That's where all the men are. And if you're a single Jewish dude, you're like, the wells are where it's at. Every time you go to a well, you get a wife. Okay? So I'm going to read this again. Once we get to well, everybody go, ooh. Okay, here we go. So then he went to Midian, where he sat down by a well. Ooh, very good, everybody. Now you're getting it. Now, a priest of Midian had 7 daughters. See, I told you. And they came to draw water to fill the troughs to their water, to water their father's flock. They came to fill the troughs. So they went, they got all the water out of the well. This is hard work, okay? That's why you got 7 of you. So it's like I don't know what kind of line they make. But then some shepherds came along and drove them away. Isn't this hilarious? This is like a 5,000-year-old story, and it's still the same thing. It's like these guys come after all the work has been done, and they use their strength to drive off all the women so that they can water their flock without getting the water from the well. You with me? This is just the same kind of stuff that always happens, you know? And Moses sees the 7 daughters, and he's like, I'm getting involved in this situation. He liked his odds, 1 to 7, you know? Moses got up, he came to their rescue, and he said, you guys get out of here. And he even got more water, and he watered their flock. And the girls returned to Reuel, their father, and he asked them, why have you returned early today? Maybe he was hoping that it would take a long time, you know? I don't know. We don't know. But he says, an Egyptian rescued us from the shepherd, and he even drew water for us and watered our flock. And he said, and where is he? Reuel asked his daughters. Now later, Reuel is going to be named Jethro. I don't know why that is, but sometimes we call my brother-in-law Mike, and sometimes we call him Miguel, and it's just, you know, sometimes they call him Reuel, sometimes they call him Jethro. Same person, okay? But anyways, he says, where is he? Why did you leave him? Invite him to have something to eat. So Moses agreed to stay with the man. It says he was content to stay with the man. That's what it says. Who gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. That was a fast dinner arrangement. No, I'm just kidding. I think there's a lot of time that passes here, okay? At some point, Moses decides, listen, it's better than starving to death. I'm going to stay with this guy from Midian. He's a nice guy. He's got 7 daughters. I kind of have my eye on the Zipporah lady. So he ends up with Zipporah. They get married, and then they have a kid. And we all know that takes at least 40 weeks, okay? So don't just think that all this happened in like a day, okay? This is a long time passing. A long time. Zipporah gave birth to a son, and Moses named him Gershom, saying, I've become a foreigner in a foreign land. That's a weird name for a kid. Foreigner. I mean, there's a band Foreigner, but still, to name your kid Foreigner is weird, you know? And the reason is that Moses just never felt at home. I don't think he ever felt at home in Egypt either. I think he was just kind of a wandering soul. You ever feel that way? Like, this place isn't quite home, but neither is that place. In fact, the rest of Moses' life will basically be spent trying to find home. So here he is, naming his kid Gershom. And then something interesting happens. It says she gave birth, but during this long period, the king of Egypt died. Now, again, we know from Stephen, that long period, 40 years, okay? Moses was in Midian for 40 years. That's a long time. He's no spring chicken. It was during that long period the king of Egypt died, and the Israelites groaned in their slavery, and they cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery, it went up to God. And God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, with Jacob. So God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. Listen, you may not realize this because we've broken this up over several weeks, but this is like the first time that God gets explicitly mentioned in the book of Exodus. And I want you to pay attention here to these verbs that are used because they're almost the exact same verbs that the Pharaoh's daughter uses with the baby boy Moses. Except this is God looking on his people and saying, there is a helpless group of people. I see them. I remember that I have a promise with this group of people. And then it says that God feels, he has compassion. You know, the root words of compassion, you know where that comes from? It's not just like some buzzword that we say when we want people to feel something for someone else. We just wish you would have some compassion. No, it actually means to suffer with. That's what it means. It means you enter into the suffering of someone else. It means that God feels in a way that's not like, oh, I feel really bad for that person, and then he just goes back to his puzzle. No. It's like, I feel I am now going to do something about this. And when God does something about it, then we read about it. That's what Exodus 2 is about. So, what are you guys going to do with this Monday, you know? Please don't put your baby in the Mississippi. That is not the application, okay? This is not prescriptive. Will not always work out the same way. We don't have like a Pharaoh's daughter down the way here, okay? But here's some truths I want you to walk away with. God sees. That's really interesting. All throughout the scripture, God is trying to help his people wrap their mind around that he sees. It's crazy because the ancient peoples had so many gods. All of them made of stone and wood. And God repeatedly says to them, these idols have eyes but can't see. And there can be no form made of me, but I see. And I hear. And I remember. And I move. I don't know if you caught this, but God moves really slowly. Really slowly. Like, uncomfortably slowly sometimes. You know, the way he responds to the situation in Egypt is by giving birth to a baby boy that takes 80 years to come and deliver the people. You know what happened in those 80 years? The people were still enslaved. That's a long time. Why does he work like that? I don't know. It's almost like his ways are not our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. But we can be certain that God sees and he hears us. Listen, your wilderness is preparation. That's the other thing. Guys, this week I had the opportunity to go to the Capitol and just meet and pray with some of our lawmakers and some of our state representatives in our Health and Human Services Department. I just want to let you know that there are some really interesting things that the Lord is doing in our governmental systems that are actually going to make impacts locally here for us. And this is stuff to be excited about, but I just want to let you know that I feel that God has uniquely brought a group of people together that are in a wilderness preparation time that he will use. So I just want to encourage you, if you feel like you're praying and your prayers are bouncing off the ceiling, and you feel like you're opening the scriptures and it's like dry cardboard, just hang in there. You know what the scripture says about Moses? That he was the most humble man who ever lived. You know what did that? 40 years of shepherding. That's what did it. It wasn't the Egyptian school that did it, let me just tell you. He was the most humble man who ever lived until there was another one who came. And even though that man was God, he didn't consider equality with God as something to be taken advantage of, but instead he emptied himself and he made himself nothing. And he served. He didn't think that he came to be served, but he came to serve. He was the ultimate compassionate expression of this God who sees, because he actually entered into the suffering with us. He became one of us, and he was put to death on a cross. But 3 days later, he was resurrected. And after 40 days, he ascended into heaven and poured out the Spirit on his church. And he now sits at the right hand of the Father. And day after day, he is surrounded by the many angels saying, "Holy, holy, holy, and worthy is the Lamb who was slain." And one day, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess on heaven and on earth and under the earth that this Jesus is Lord. He is the one that draws us out of the water and rescues us. Every other deliverer that's ever come, it's a signpost pointing to him. So I just want to encourage you, in this season that you're in, just keep going. Hang in there. And listen, if you have never trusted in this Jesus, let me just tell you, your whole life will be a wilderness. Because the whole time you will just be kicking whatever hope can it is down the road. Oh, if I just get this other job. Oh, okay, that didn't actually fulfill. But if I just had this husband instead of that husband, okay, that one didn't actually fulfill. Oh, if I just had a different car. And then you just keep moving the hope down the road until you finally realize that none of those things are actually going to bring satisfaction to your heart. And actually, just like Moses, you will always be wandering. Because there is only one place where you can have a home. And that's actually in this Jesus. Our world is all too loud and too fast. And so part of our regular rhythms here at New Life is just, after we receive the word, we just make space to just be quiet and to just hear from God. And so if you would with me, we just open our hands just in a posture of surrender there in our laps. We'll just pray this simple prayer together. Come, Holy Spirit.